So we're going to do a deep dive today into an interview with Geoff Binney. He is like a seasoned attorney. He specializes in defending home inspectors, and some of his insights are really valuable when it comes to E&O and liability landmines out there. So we're going to kind of unpack his advice.
He's been doing this for over 15 years.
And give you 3 key takeaways to help you minimize risk and keep your business safe. It's like your E&O survival guide, straight from the legal trenches.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting is that he points out that even though the real estate market has cooled down, claims against home inspectors, they haven't really slowed down at the same rate.
So fewer inspections, but the same amount of claims.
Inspectors are facing a higher percentage of claims per inspection.
So the target on your back is even bigger.
It's like it got bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely raises the stakes. Understanding this legal landscape is more crucial than ever.
Absolutely. Awareness is key. Being proactive about risk management. That's what's really important. And that's where Binney's experience really helped. He talks about the most common claims he sees. And unsurprisingly, they often start with things like water intrusion and foundation issues.
Yeah, it makes sense. Those are big ticket items that can cause major headaches for homeowners and major lawsuits for inspectors.
Leaky roofs, damp basements, cracks in the foundation, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Binney says that most of these claims aren't actually rooted in negligence on the inspector's part.
So if it's not negligence, what is it then?
He says it often boils down to miscommunication and misaligned expectations. Homeowners sometimes expect inspectors to be all-knowing, to uncover every single flaw in a house. He even quotes some clients as saying, "I thought they were going to tell me everything that was wrong with the house."
That's an impossible standard. No one can predict every potential issue.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky. That gap between what homeowners expect and what inspectors can actually do, that creates a lot of room for disputes.
So how do we bridge that gap? What does Binney recommend for navigating those tricky situations?
Well, he's a big advocate for what he calls pre-claims defense. So basically, it's addressing issues head-on before they turn into full-blown lawsuits. And his success rate with this approach is amazing. We're talking 95 to 97% of claims resolved before they even get to the courtroom.
Wow, that's incredible. So what's the secret behind this pre-claim strategy? What makes it so effective?
Well, it's all about bringing in an objective third party early in the process. When a homeowner's upset, it's really easy for things to get blown out of proportion.
Yeah, it's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Exactly. But when you have someone who's not emotionally invested, someone who can just look at the situation objectively and kind of mediate the conversation, it can really de-escalate things.
So take the heat out of the situation. Let cooler heads prevail.
Exactly. That's why having that pre-claims process in place is one of the most valuable things you can do.
Okay, so we're starting to see why. Home inspectors are often the first ones targeted. When something goes wrong, they're walking into a situation where expectations are really high, emotions are charged, and the stakes are high.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why it's so important to understand the legal landscape and have a solid plan in place. So our first key takeaway here is don't wait for a claim to happen. Be proactive. Having a pre-claims process can really be your secret weapon to keep those disputes out of court.
That's a great first takeaway. But before we move on, I'm curious, why are home inspectors often the first ones in the crosshairs when something goes wrong?
Well, just think about it. When a homeowner discovers a problem after moving into a new house, who do they naturally look to for answers?
The expert, the one who is supposed to find the problem, the home inspector.
Exactly. And while there are other professionals involved, like realtors, they often have pre-existing relationships with the clients, and that bond can sometimes make homeowners less likely to sue them, even if they suspect there was some negligence.
So the home inspector, who's often brought in as a neutral third party, ends up bearing the brunt of the blame. It's almost like they're carrying the weight of everyone's expectations.
In a way, yeah. And that's why it's so important to not only be a skilled inspector, but also be good at communicating and building relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about the importance of pre-claim defense, but let's dig into some of Binney's more specific advice. What are some of his top tips for staying ahead of these potential claims?
Well, one of the things he really emphasizes is having a really solid inspection agreement. He says some inspectors, even veteran inspectors, try to go without one, and it's just incredibly risky.
But you mean they're out there doing inspections with no contract?
Yeah, and he even poses this question, wouldn't you agree that today's society is more litigious than it was 5, 10, or 20 years ago?
Yeah, it seems like everyone's suing everybody these days.
Yeah, exactly. And he says, look, you don't have to screw up to get sued. You could do a flawless inspection, write a perfect report, and still find yourself in court.
So having that contract isn't about admitting you're going to make mistakes. It's about recognizing that you can't control everything.
Exactly. It's like that contract becomes your shield, your
Yeah.
first line of defense against those unexpected situations.
So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. And it's not just about having any contract. It's about having a well-drafted one, a legally sound agreement that clearly outlines your responsibilities and the scope of your work.
So what are some of those key elements that inspectors should make sure are in their contracts?
Well, he highlights a few crucial clauses that can make a real difference in protecting your business. Let's start with what's called the limitation of liability clause. This is basically like drawing a line in the sand, saying, okay, I'm responsible up to this point.
So it sets a cap on how much you could potentially be liable for.
Exactly. It helps to kind of manage everyone's expectations up front.
Yeah, where you're walking into a house full of potential hidden issues.
Yeah.
So limiting your liability just makes good business sense. What other clauses does he recommend?
Another important one is what's called the attorney's fees provision. This one can be a real deterrent to frivolous lawsuits because it basically allows the winning party to recover their legal costs from the losing party.
Oh, so if someone sues you and loses,
Yeah,
they could be on the hook for their own legal fees and yours as well.
that's right. And that can be a powerful motivator for people to think twice before filing a lawsuit.
Okay, so that levels the playing field.
Exactly.
Discourages those who are just kind of looking to take advantage.
Exactly.
Anything else we should know about?
Yeah. The next one is called the indemnification clause, and it might sound a little complicated, but it's basically about preventing someone from sidestepping the contract and suing someone else involved in the transaction, like the homeowner's agent, to try to get around the limitations that are in your contract.
It's like a safety net that ensures everyone is held accountable.
Exactly. And then finally, we have what's called the notice provision. This clause sets clear timelines for when issues need to be reported. This protects you from disputes over pre-existing problems that might have been there before you even stepped foot in the house.
Yeah, you don't want to get into one of those he said, she said situations.
So all these clauses, they work together to create a comprehensive legal framework that protects you from all angles. And that brings us to our second key takeaway. Don't underestimate the power of a solid contract. It's not just a formality. It's really your best defense against potential lawsuits.
That's a great point. It's about being proactive, thinking ahead, and having those legal safeguards in place before you even step foot in the house.
Exactly. Now let's go back to that pre-claims process we talked about earlier. Binney really gave us just a glimpse of how powerful it can be. I think it's worth exploring that a little bit more.
Yeah, let's dive into the specifics of setting one up and why it's so effective at resolving these issues before they become full-blown legal battles. So how do you actually set up this pre-claim safety net? How do you make it work?
Well, the first step is understanding what resources are available to you. Binney suggests reaching out to your insurance carrier and really getting clear on their process for handling a potential claim.
So don't just assume you know how it works. Pick up the phone and get those details.
Exactly. Find out who you need to contact, what information they need, and what steps they're going to take to help you resolve the issue.
Especially when it comes to protecting yourself.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that most insurance policies include some form of pre-claims assistance, but they may have specific procedures you need to follow.
So being proactive and knowing those details ahead of time can save you a lot of headaches.
It really can. And here's another tip from Binney. Don't try to handle everything yourself.
Yeah, he touched on that earlier about the importance of having that objective third party.
Right. It's natural to want to defend yourself when a claim comes up. But when emotions are running high, it's easy to make things worse.
Yeah, you get defensive. The client gets more upset, and the situation just escalates.
Exactly. That's why having someone who's removed from the situation, someone who can stay calm and objective, can be so valuable.
So who would this third party be?
It could be someone from your insurance carrier, a mediator, or even an attorney who specializes in these types of claims.
So someone who can act as a buffer and help facilitate a more productive conversation.
Exactly. Their role is to gather all the facts, review the inspection report and any supporting evidence, and then help both parties come to some kind of agreement.
Sounds like having that support system is essential.
It really is. And it all comes back to that key principle we've been talking about. Being proactive. Don't wait for a problem to blow up before you start thinking about solutions.
Be prepared. Know your resources. Have a plan in place. That's our third and final takeaway. A solid pre-claims process is like an insurance policy for your peace of mind.
Well said. And there's one more resource that Binney mentions that I think is worth highlighting.
Okay, let's hear it.
He specifically mentions OREP, which stands for Organization of Real Estate Professionals. They offer E&O insurance and risk management resources, specifically for home inspectors.
So it's like a one-stop shop for protecting your business.
Exactly. They have a ton of information on their website, including sample contract language, risk management tips, and educational resources.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
We'll definitely include a link to their website in the show notes.
Well, I think it's time to wrap things up.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring those E&O and liability landmines that every home inspector needs to watch out for. We unpacked some really valuable insights from Geoff Binney, who's been on the front lines defending inspectors for years.
His expertise has really helped us understand this legal landscape and given us a practical roadmap for navigating it safely.
So remember our 3 key takeaways. Be proactive, have a solid contract, and set up that pre-claims safety net.
Those are really the cornerstones of building a successful and sustainable business, one that can weather those inevitable storms.
And don't forget those valuable resources like OREP that can provide additional guidance and support.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we'll leave you with this final thought. Knowledge is power. By understanding the risks, being prepared, and taking those proactive steps to protect yourself, you can not only survive, but thrive in this world of home inspections.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.